Hi, I'm Rob Penczak.
And I'm Larry Mendoza.
Welcome to Road to Reason, a skeptic's guide to the 21st century. Today we're lucky to be joined by August Brunsman, the Executive Director of the Secular Student Alliance. August, thank you for joining us today.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Now we're going to start off the first half of the show just talking about a bunch of news in the secular and atheist communities. August, feel free to chime in on anything you'd like. And Larry, you want to start us off with some talk about the cross?
Yeah, sure. So good news. We have the Mount Soledad Cross in La Jolla, California. I don't know if you guys have been paying attention to that, but it's the longest lasting establishment clause in American history. It lasted for about 23 years. So just to give you a little bit of background, this cross was erected in 1954 on public land. It's actually a city-owned park. And the site has been used historically for like baptisms and weddings and things along those lines. In 1954, they erected this cross as a tribute to World War I, II, and Korean veterans, except that it was erected under the auspices of our Lord and Savior. So it was a clear Christian cross on public land, with the caveat that it's a symbol to represent our veterans. So what happened was a gentleman by the name of Philip Paulson sued because he thought that this was a clear violation of the First Amendment, which is, government shall not establish a religion. And having a cross on public land, clearly that's kind of violating that. So he sued. Apparently he died, and during the course of this lawsuit, which went through so many appeals, and a gentleman by Steve Trunk took it over. So it got appealed to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, and they declared it unconstitutional. What ended up happening, though, was that the Christians appealed it to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court decided to not listen to the oral arguments on this. So it's going back to the lower courts, and right now, basically, it's this cross is on life support, and so to speak, and it's the Christians are going to try to appeal it again to the Ninth Circuit Court, which already deemed it unconstitutional, and a federal judge that originally said that it was constitutional to keep it now changed its mind and said no, this is unconstitutional. So it's going to get appealed back to the Circuit Court, but it's more than likely going to get rejected. So this cross is probably going to come down.
Maybe they need to go with the same argument of the steel beam cross that was found in the World Trade Center wreckage, where they decided, this is a secular cross, this is not a religious symbol. Maybe they need to go with that to kind of skirt the Constitution.
Right, and that's actually what a lot of the Christian right is trying to do these days, is they're trying to secularize religious symbols so that they then can place them all over the place. And that's the case with crosses, that's the case with the Ten Commandments. They're trying to turn them into the secular symbol, just kind of like the motto, "In God We Trust." The reason why that's on our money and it became our motto in the 1950s during the Cold War, we needed to separate ourselves from the evil atheists, godless communists, right? And so they were able to justify in a Supreme Court ruling that "In God We Trust" is actually a secular motto.
Right, if you look at that, if you look at the Pledge of Allegiance, these are some clear transgressions, and there's a dispute. Is this the kind of stuff that we really want to focus on? Does it matter? Well, it turns out that it really does matter in the public's mindset and psyche as to are we a Christian nation?
Right.
This should not be a question in anybody's mind, but with sufficient propaganda and with the Fox News network to keep this alive.
Right.
A lot of people genuinely don't realize that our founders went to great lengths to make sure that we were not a Christian nation. They spelled it out in detail, but
the founding fathers clearly wanted this nation to be a nation that is free for people to practice any religion they would like, and even to have discussions about religion in the public square. The problem is, what's happening is that it's becoming an exclusive and privileged idea only for Christians.
Well, in the World Trade Center, it's a perfect example.
Exactly,
with that secular cross. There's not a lot of public support for Muslims to start any kind of community center in that area. So religious leaders may talk a good story on one sense. We're just trying to be inclusive, but as soon as it comes down to it, this is about getting Christianity into the schools, getting Christianity, the Christian theology to run our politics.
Right.
So we can't be misled, and we need to call them out every time it happens.
Exactly, and that's the reason why you're seeing a lot of issues, even for example, on other on courthouse lawns, for example, the experience I've had, the organization I belong to, Butler Atheists, we've been trying to fight the Loudoun Board of Supervisors in Loudoun County here in Northern Virginia to stop having them put a manger every Christmas, a religious figure on the courthouse lawn. And this was put actually by a church, and they allowed that. Well, that started to be challenged by actually the grounds committee of the courthouse lawn decided that maybe we shouldn't have this because it's kind of tearing up the lawn. There's an old tree there. It's kind of doing some damage. Well, that caused a mass hysteria, and the Board of Supervisors took that on and said, no, we need to have, this is it's been a historical thing. We've been doing it for so many years. And what ended up happening is we got involved, and we said, okay, well, if you're going to allow people to put Christian symbols on the courthouse lawn, then we as atheists would like to put some symbols as well. And what ended up happening was it created a huge media frenzy, and everybody was upset. And really what broke the camel's back on this was that a Christian, okay, not an atheist, a Christian decided to put a Santa Claus there was a skeleton with the Santa Claus outfit crucified on a cross. Now, this wasn't an original idea. This was a copying of a rendition of an artist who also did this to kind of criticize the over-commercialization of Christmas.
And this is the war within the religion about what Christmas means. It's not the atheists going after it.
Right.
This is Christians saying, is this about the birth of Christ and all that?
Right.
Or is this about the money that you can generate by selling all of these toys and family get-togethers and food and all the the aspects of Christianity that have of Christmas that have nothing to do with the religion per se, which is probably how most of the country enjoys Christmas.
Absolutely, and I mean, and the irony about this whole thing is that everybody blamed us atheists for putting up this really disgusting, ugly thing, and it's insulting. And the irony is that we were defending the Christians' free speech right because we believe that on public land, fine, you want to have a conversation in a public square about religion, that's fine, but you have to allow every opinion. And what it is, though, Christians, it seemed, at least in our experience in Loudoun County, they wanted free speech only if it's the speech that they liked.
Mm-hmm. And that leads, I like to talk about the American Atheist billboard in Times Square now.
Right.
Because the religious right is not thrilled about the atheist free speech when they're putting up, I'm not sure if we have a graphic to throw up there or not, about getting Christ out of Christmas. Christmas nowadays really isn't about the religious overtones for the vast majority of people. Fox News had some hysterical clips of them kind of dancing around this whole issue, and one of their comments was, how would you atheists like it if we put up a sign saying, well, atheists, thank God you're wrong? And I was like, do you guys not realize the signs throughout America on all your churches and the vicious things that they say toward atheists and toward gays and to all the people that they are looking to exclude?
Yeah, I mean, as far as us being insulted by Christian symbols and things like that. And that's actually the billboard that's up right now. And everybody's up in arms about this, right? But the thing is that as you said, every time I drive down 95 south to go to Florida sometimes, I mean, I can't tell you how many on the side of the road on private property, okay, signs of repent, go to hell, you need Jesus, otherwise you're damned, And to some people that is offensive. But the minute we speak out and try to fight for our rights, all of a sudden we are victimizing a majority of opinion.
Well, it's just the living in that alternate reality. Like, how can they be oblivious to that when 90% of it goes against us?
Right.
It's just very funny. So religion is alive. Well, let's just kind of keep moving on because things are moving quick. Mm-hmm. I want to talk about creationists in Texas. So you brought up some good points. Again, religion and the craziness with it is not behind it.
Yeah, so right now in the first televised debate of all 4 lieutenant governors candidates in a debate in Texas embrace creationism. Okay, all 4 of them. The question is now, of course there's the Democrats. The story didn't talk about the Democrats, so I'm not really sure, but at least all of the Republican candidates are creationists.
Right, so in God's own party, and instead of this eliminating them from competition because, wait, we have a wacko that doesn't believe in evolution, that thinks we're 6,000 years old, that all the stuff that goes with those creationists, instead of getting excluded from holding public office where they're going to make decisions that affect literally millions of people, right? Texas is probably the second most populous, I'm guessing, in the United States.
Yeah, I would imagine.
It's required for them to run for the GOP in Texas to embrace this kind of inane belief system. This is what gave us George Bush, his crusade, for oil and dollars and to kill all those infidels, and Rick Perry, who, when he wasn't at Niggerhead Lodge, he was off thinking about, I need to dismantle these terrible things in the government. If only I could remember which offices were so bad.
Sure.
So this is serious business when you get people like this running parts of our country.
And it's serious business, and it sort of ties in even with what we're going to talk about later with August. These guys, the school board, right, decides what textbooks, science textbooks, are used, and usually publishing companies go with what Texas decides to use because it's one of the largest, states that we have in a country.
Right, that's a great point to make, and there's so much planning ahead of time that has to go into those textbooks.
Right.
And so Texas really sets a huge amount of the agenda for the whole country in what they put in those. That's a great point.
Luckily, recently, and sort of a good news in Texas, the publishers refused to bend to the will of the creationists on the school board, and they had to accept books that taught evolution and climate change without any disclaimers. It's straight science. Finally the publishers, I think, stood up to Texas school board.
And the publishers need a united front against this because there's really a big financial downside. It's very easy to go with the flow, find Texas being stupid about this, we're putting in false information, but we're going to make our money, and if we don't do it, somebody else is.
Right.
They really need a united front to say, no, we're teaching science now, we're going to teach actual history now instead of pseudo-history. And, if God is searching for truth, shouldn't we put some real facts in those books for young children to learn about?
Absolutely. And my brother had a wonderful bumper sticker on his car that says, we cannot train our kids for 21st century jobs with, second century, ideologies and things like that. So luckily, but what's happening in Texas is you have, 4 lieutenant governors. They have a lot of power. They have, control over a lot of, legislation, and, Texas legislature is all pretty much majority, probably, very religious, probably creationist, and it's a really big problem. And this is not just in Texas. This is happening, across the board. And so I think it's important to understand who it is that you are electing into office, because this will hurt us economically. When we start dumbing down our kids, which already are, especially I have 3 stepkids, and they're more interested in video games than anything else, and then you want to dumb down even more whatever little they learn in school, and it all depends on the state, how well the school systems are, the counties. We're going to start to have a really big problem economically, and there's
also the ethics of it, of knowingly dumping the factual information and teaching something that fits with your theology or your ideology.
Right.
That sends a message. That's what these kids are going to, ingest and digest for the next 10 or 15 years. And when they grow up, they will be equally comfortable with dismissing the truth and going with whatever the Bible told them. And we can see, we can talk about in Michigan, they just passed this legislation. It's getting known as rape legislation, but somebody
the rape insurance.
The rape insurance, but somebody on that made a very good point that we really shouldn't call it rape insurance because it's a much broader issue. It's really not good enough to say, fine, if somebody is raped or if somebody is a victim of incest, then we won't give them an abortion, but otherwise. Otherwise there's no way. This is really, a woman's right to choose that's constitutionally protected.
Sure. That
all these people in the GOP are finding a dozen ways to skirt the Constitution, and they're giving primacy to a single cell over the 30+ trillion cells of a grown woman.
Right.
So, I think I understand the draw to call it, the rape bill or whatever you want, but I think it's important to realize that even if you're not raped, even if you're not a victim of incest, this is a woman's right to choose, and we need to sort of be very vocal when we see the GOP trampling women's rights and, end running the Constitution.
Well, just let me also remind everybody that this law in Michigan was passed on a referendum, and it was 4% of the voting population was the one that voted this law into place. So 4% of the population in Michigan imposed this law on every single woman in Michigan.
Right, it's not like anybody was forcing that 4% to go out and get an abortion.
Right.
And this is a really important point that you make, that one thing that religion does very well, the religious right, has been mobilizing their base. And if they can get a tiny percentage of people to go out there and vote in election boards or to do legislation like this, they can really set the agenda for millions of people, even though it's a tiny sliver. 98% of Catholics, I think, use birth control.
Right.
Yet a tiny fraction can set the agenda that tries to make it illegal for us to get access to birth control.
Right, and that's exactly the kind of problems we have with low voter turnout, which is something that we see often. And in Loudoun County, where I reside now in Virginia, it's gone blue every single election, including the last two presidential elections. They re-elected Barack Obama. They've elected recently the attorney general, our governor. It's always blue. However, the interesting thing is, in Loudoun County, all of the board of supervisors are all Republican, every single one of them. So what's going on? It's something interesting, and I think what happens is, our Loudoun Board of Supervisors elections is they do it on off years when there's no really big election. And so not many people go out and vote. And I think that's the key, is when you have a small number of people voting, then you're stuck with whatever those people decide is right. And so that's kind of the issue. So that's why it's important that no matter what the elections are in your state, in your locality, go out and vote, because otherwise you might be stuck with something. And this doesn't even...
that brings up another separate issue about there's a lot of people that know that and that they want to go out and vote, and that they're very purposefully being disenfranchised by these same coalition of the people on the religious right, and then you have some moneyed interests and right-wing political ideologues. But there's a very active campaign to make sure that millions of blacks, Latinos, elderly, and young, all the people that would tend to vote Democrat, that they can't vote. So even if they know they should, they're trying to stop them, and it has real consequences. And we can look right here in Virginia, we don't have to go to Texas, where Ken Cuccinelli, as Attorney General, most of the time they would, I guess, resign if they're running for governor because of the potential conflicts of interest. Right. But no, Ken's got his Bible-based ethics, and he realized, I'm a godly man, I'm not going to have any conflict of interest. Lo and behold, there's now this, it was a really tight race. Ken Cuccinelli sends directions to this board, of elections of how they're supposed to count the votes, which votes they should count, which ones they shouldn't, and he's really trying to influence the election, and it matters.
Yes.
Are we going to have an attorney general who tries to enforce the law or who tries to enforce the Bible?
Sure. No, absolutely. And so, but that's why it's important that everybody votes, because when you have these close, tight elections, and by the way, what you were referring to was the attorney general position that Ken Cuccinelli is leaving soon, luckily. And that's the close election between the two attorney generals that were, or candidates that were running for attorney general. And so now there's going to be a recount, and it's a really close race. It's like 0.01% or something, by a few hundred votes. So we'll see what happens. But anyways.
Now we're going to talk about the kidnapping of Christ you had brought up. We're going to try to cover a few more things before the break, and then we'll get to the secular student alliance. So kidnapping of Christ.
There's a documentary coming out in 2014. It's called Kidnapped for Christ, and I will just give you a quick synopsis of what this is about. There have been, in this country, and I believe it's the parents of kids that are gay, or somehow there's something wrong, or they don't, the parents don't like how
they don't fit the Christian mold of a good person.
They don't fit maybe the mold of a Christian person, but mostly it's mostly gay students. They're being actually what we call, it's kidnapping against their will. They're being brought to the Dominican Republic, where there are schools that are run and operated by American evangelicals that are designed to reprogram kids to fit an evangelical mold. So if you're gay, they're going to try to reprogram you from not, doing the whole.
Now, has Michelle Bachmann's, their organization, been shut down? They can't get away with this in the U.S., so they have to go
that's
out of the
interesting.
country?
I'm not sure what the deal is. This documentary is coming out in 2014. It's called Kidnapped for Christ. I urge everybody to watch it because there's some pretty scary stuff going on underneath the radar that a lot of these extreme right-wing evangelical people are doing, and who knows what's going on, in Dominican Republic with these kids. I mean, the abuse.
And some of it's not. Some of it's not under the radar. Some of it's right out there in front of us, and it's our leading GOP. If you look at every single candidate, was like one whack job worse than the next, and it's no longer that the right wingers are the fringe. And this, the religious stuff that they bring to the table, again, instead of eliminating them, it's like you have to be out of your head bonkers. You have to, hate the gays. You have to, be so vile against humanity to compete. We'll hopefully have time to get into a little bit of the race stuff because I want to talk about Newt Gingrich, and we'll save that for a little bit. One more religious thing. In terms of the White Santa on Fox News, what can you tell us about that?
All right, the White Santa on Fox News. So Megyn Kelly, one of the anchors in one of the shows on Fox News, was having a debate. I guess this was a day or two ago, and she basically said during this debate with a couple of other people. Something came. I can't remember exactly what the story was, but about a black Santa. Oh, somebody came up and said, black kids growing up, they felt, or somebody wrote a book or an article that if you're black and you grew up with a white Santa, you almost felt like not inclusive, right? You're not included in the culture, in the American, culture of Christmas. And so they said, why don't we have a black Santa, So anyways, what ended up happening was they were having this discussion about political correctness, and Megyn Kelly decided to say, look, this is political correctness gone amok. You have to accept certain things. Santa is white, by the way, kids. This is verifiable. And so is Jesus. Jesus is also white, and that's also verifiable.
Right, Middle Eastern Jesus is a white guy.
Okay, so Santa being white, fine, whatever. I've seen black Santas. I have in malls and various places.
We're talking about pretend Santa is white. Pretend Santa
well, sure, like in the malls,
white.
But to say that, assuming Jesus even existed, I mean, there's still some scholars debating that. Certainly he was not white. He was a Jewish man in the Middle East. I don't think you will find a white person in that era, or even today, unless they're visiting, being a Caucasian, blue-eyed, blonde-haired depiction of the American Jesus that Megyn Kelly, I guess, has in her mind.
But if you see it on the news, and that's an important thing about the media, is Fox, I don't know if it's still the most popular, but if half of our country gets its news day in and day out from people saying moronic things like that, they actually start to believe it. It's part of how the brain works, and you get familiar with it, and so you start to assume it's true. You hear it from several different angles, from a bunch of people in collusion. If you hear Rush Limbaugh say it, the Drudge Report says it, Fox News says it, the Heritage Foundation, you get this from all these angles, and you start thinking, oh, this must be the truth. And you have half the country living in an alternate reality where Santa's white and Jesus is white, and we're a Christian nation, and most people aren't out there trying to do harm. But I think I would hold the people on news stations and reporters to a completely different level and standard, that they need to know what they're talking about, and not just say this.
I mean, apparently, and these are like opinion shows, so, but the thing is that...
It's opinion shows on Fox News. I think that's a very purposeful decision, that it's an opinion news, they're trying to confuse people.
Sure. And the thing is that, I made a joke the other day, even on Facebook, I wrote that I think that Comedy Central and Fox News are actually working together, because Fox News gives Comedy Central and The Daily Show so much fodder, so much material, that I'm really starting to think, man, this is, it's just too
you
perfect,
couldn't write this stuff. Nobody would believe it. If you wrote it down, nobody would buy it.
The best writers in comedy couldn't come up with some of this stuff. But anyways, basically Megyn Kelly's like, Santa's white, Jesus is white, deal with it.
Right, and the stuff about white Santa, it gets less funny when you look at the Bible and the story of, like Noah, the son of Ham, where black people were kind of cursed because if they saw Noah naked and drunk, or, it's unclear if metaphorically if they castrated him or did something, but so they were punished with blackness. And you look at the Mormon religion.
So
where you said there's a little progress, but like all the black people there, they're not just black. They chose the wrong side in the war against God, and so God cursed them with blackness.
The Cain and Abel stuff. Yeah, and actually, interesting about the Mormon is interesting you mentioned that. Recently, as of last couple days, there was a document that was released from the Mormon Church, finally basically going against, I guess, years of doctrine, of Mormon doctrine.
Right.
And they're now saying that, well, dark-skinned people aren't really cursed. And here is, and I quote, and I'm going to read this because this is interesting. Here's what they're saying. The document that from the Mormon headquarters explains that even the church's history of racism is simply part of the American culture, right? So what they said was the church was established in 1830, okay? And during an era of great racial division in the United States, obviously. At the time, many people of African descent, okay, lived in slavery, which was true, and racial distinctions and prejudice were not just common, but customary with Americans. Those realities, though unfamiliar and disturbing today, influenced all aspects of people's lives, including their religion.
What about God? Where was God the leader in all this?
So, basically, the religions was founded on human cultural identities at the time. But in my opinion, and this goes to any religion, okay, and even a Christian religion, if it's doctrine, why are you changing that now? It goes to show that religions have to evolve. Okay, they have to evolve to fit with scientific progress and also cultural progress. So, for instance, in a Christian religion, a lot of now more liberal Christian churches are accepting evolution as being, a valid thing because they have to accept because
it's too humiliating to pretend anymore that it's not true.
Right.
But they were dragged. It's important to make the distinction. It wasn't that Christianity led or that God led. These religions were dragged, kicking and screaming out of embarrassment to finally admit, yeah, evolution is true. Yeah, black people are human beings too. In 100 years, it'll be, yeah, gay people, they're regular people too.
Right.
But they're not leading, and God is not more moral. He might be more pious.
Well,
but he's, there's no morality from God.
It would appear that if the Holy Spirit is transcendent throughout time, then the Holy Spirit certainly has a multiple personality disorder because clearly, it's not, the Holy Spirit tends to be, it tends to become what you are, right? So God hates the same people you hate. God likes the same people you like. It's kind of interesting how that works.
There's a great brain study that shows, that the areas where God is thinking and where you're thinking are identical. So whatever you want God to think, he conveniently happens to be thinking.
And this Mormon, finally coming out and saying that is a prime example that religion really is nothing more than a man-made cultural entity, and especially with the Mormon Church and every other church.
They allowed blacks to become priests only recently. Also, again, probably just being shamed into it. It's like you can't keep doing this. Scientology is another one. We're gonna have a great guest next week. Jamie DeWolf is gonna be on. But Scientology also has some. L. Ron Hubbard was very bigoted against black people. Had some real nasty things to say. And I just want to make the point that it's not. Religion. People want to say without it, we're not going to be moral. If you look at all the bigotry along all sorts of lines that religion has brought us, slavery was justified for years based on the Bible.
Biblical. There's a great book, by the way, real quick, and then we do got to take a short break. There's a book called A Defense of Virginia and Through Her the South. It was from a Presbyterian minister by the name of Robert Dabney that gives specific, not only Old, but New Testament accounts of the justification for slavery. Okay, Jesus never once admonished slavery, not one time.
Just show you how to take care of your slaves. Last point, we're going to go to break in just a minute. I was really taking Nelson Mandela, obviously passed away recently, and seeing Rick Santorum, who again is Roman Catholic, completely devoted, therefore obviously a very good man, not so much. His policies are really bad for regular people. when he sits there and tries to ride on Nelson Mandela's coattails as if he's bringing social justice and says that Obamacare is kind of like apartheid, and that sets him up, I guess, as the Nelson Mandela of our country, we need to call him out on that. I think we'll have to save that
Slightly different issues.
Yeah,
there.
we'll save that for another time. But again, it's important when these right-wingers that are so anti-women and that are so not pro-black. One of Santorum's comments was something about, I don't want to take money away from everybody to give to the black people. I mean, he's got no business doing that. We are going to go to a break. We're doing something special this week. You want to tell us about it?
I'm sorry, what?
Oh, for the break. Instead of doing a regular clip.
Yeah, we're going to go on break for about 4.5 minutes. We're going to show you a video by a hip-hop artist called Sickness. The song is called Hypatia's Rain, and he was actually a guest on our show. And after that, we're going to come back with August Brunsman, the executive director for the Secular Student Alliance, and we'll talk about that. So we'll be right back.
And we reached about 250,000 people in this area. So for people, secular community, atheist community, if you have images, videos, songs you want to send in, get in touch with our Facebook page, and we'll see about getting them on the air. Thank you.
This is Richard Dawkins. Doing commercials is unfamiliar territory for me, but I'm inviting you to watch Road to Reason, A Skeptic's Guide to the 21st Century, on Fairfax Public Access every Sunday. Each week the hosts tackle wishful thinking, religion, pseudoscience, and the harm they cause, with a combination of facts, humor, and community involvement. They challenge believers to defend their faith and give you, the skeptic, a voice. With live call-ins for viewers and streaming on the World Wide Web, there's never a dull moment. Don't wait. Look at them now on Facebook and YouTube. And remember to watch Road to Reason, A Skeptic's Guide to the 21st Century, or there'll be hell to pay.
Welcome to the rain.
In quiet. And in full submission, I do not permit a woman to teach or to have authority over
Okay, you've just witnessed an excellent reason why people need to send in donations to the show. Sometimes we have stuff that just doesn't work out, and we just have a couple of us to handle it. So on the brighter side, we are back with August Brunsman. August, thank you for being there on the first half. Why don't you start off? You want to tell us about your what the Secular Student Alliance is all about, and then we'll get to your personal history after that.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me, Rob and Larry.
Yep.
Sure. So the Secular Student Alliance is an umbrella organization for atheist, agnostic, and humanist groups on high school and college campuses all over the country. We're really interested in normalizing secular identity and in spreading secular values through student activism. And we have around 360 groups around the country, mostly at colleges, but there's a few at high schools as well. And they're out there active all the time, having all kinds of events and engaging their communities and spreading our values.
That's great. So it's interesting. So you say 360. You guys have grown fairly quickly over the last few years. How long has the SSA been around?
We've been around since 2000.
2000?
The growth really started to take off right around the time that the Four Horsemen published their books, right around 2007, 2008. We had about 100 affiliates then. So I think that brought a lot of attention our way, and a lot of people decided that they needed to stand up and be counted. And get involved.
And I think it's really important, the normalization that you spoke about. We had some students on here a few weeks ago, and they talked about that being one of the problems, where as an atheist, I thought you were a little bit more accepted now, but even amongst college kids, there's still some stigma with being an atheist. How are you guys trying to help to kind of get out the word that there's a lot of humanism involved in atheism, we just don't believe in certain things that there's not proof for? How are you helping to normalize things?
Sure. So I think the most important thing that any of our groups do to help normalize things is simply to be a visible part of the campus community. So just through existing, it's a really big help. And let alone doing things like running events, or having debates or discussions. Really popular event that kind of helps normalize atheists. It happens every April. It's the third Thursday in April, is National Ask an Atheist Day, which actually got started at our group at the University of Illinois, then spread from there. And it's a really simple concept. All you do is get a table, go out to your quad or your student union, and put a sign in front of it that says "Ask an Atheist," and you have people come up and ask you questions. And the point is not to convert people. The point is to just let them know that we're here and people can ask questions, just because I think it is very much the case that most Americans have met an atheist, but I don't think that most Americans know that they have met an atheist. So just being out there and being visible can be really, really important, and answering questions that people have really, I think, goes a long way. Also, we think of it being really important to have these debates, between like Dan Barker and Dinesh D'Souza and people like that. And it is. And I think those debates are great, and we host and fund those debates all the time. But something to realize about even really popular events like that are that the most people that see or experience or interact with the debate are the people that see the advertisements for the debate or the speaker or whatever you have. And simply having those advertisements out there as part of what students see on campus, I think, goes a long way to kind of just like let people know, like, hey, not everybody thinks the same way. There's a diversity of opinion in the United States about how we relate to religious belief.
No, absolutely, and I think that's great. And I'm a firm believer of student activism, especially to kind of promote the message. I myself, when I was at Virginia Commonwealth University, had started a group, and we actually hosted the first Frank Turek and Christopher Hitchens debate, late Christopher Hitchens, and that was a big success. And the thing is, it gets kind of tough. So I did start this group. This was probably around 2008 is when, I started a group, I think it was 2007. In 2008, we had the debate, and then the problem was all the officers ended up graduating, and then the group kind of started going a little bit and then kind of faltered. I'm trying to help them kick it back up again. What would you recommend for all of the other schools out there that are kind of maybe struggling with continuity? What would you recommend they do? Sure.
So got a lot of recommendations. The first thing they should do is they should go to secularstudents.org, and they should sign up for affiliation with the Secular Student Alliance. It's completely free, and that will put you in touch with all kinds of resources. So that will give you access to our group running guide. That'll give you access to our fantastic campus organizing staff. Liz Liddell, Nick Stancato, Andy Cheadleford, Sam Jackson, and all the other great campus organizers out there. And they can help you plan ahead. And some specific things that are going to help you do to plan ahead are to, long before your senior year, to identify some other people who could be leaders in your organization and go to them and say, hey, Sarah, I think that it'd be really great to have you be a president or chair or whatever your group happens to have at in our group next year, and to get that going early enough in advance so that when you're a senior, you can still be around and help out the groups and help out your group because you know how to fill out the form to request space from your university, but the new people don't, and there's no reason for them to learn that all over again. So having you around to kind of give them advice and still being an active part of the group, it just makes an absolutely enormous difference. So that's the key. Another thing that we've really started putting a lot of resources into lately is advisors. Almost all schools require that there be an advisor, and we want the groups to be student-led, and we think that's really important. But advisors play a really critical role because they are there from year to year to year, and they can help with the continuity a great deal. And in the last couple years, we have added an advisors track to our annual conference. So we get advisors to come and learn how to be better advisors. So getting your advisor plugged into that is a really great idea. And having your your advisor and everybody from your group, especially those up-and-coming leaders, come to the Secular Student Alliance conference every summer is a really great way to get plugged in and get resources. And knowing students on other campuses can really help kind of provide a support network for leadership on your own campus. So so that can be another really great way to get plugged in. While I'm thinking of it, you can go to secularstudents.org to learn more about our upcoming conferences. Our two venues. We've got one in Phoenix, which will be at the end of June, and then we have another one in Columbus, Ohio, at the Ohio State University in July. And you can get all the details for those and register for them. If you're a student or a non-student, there's tons of grassroots activism training that's useful for anybody. But obviously, we're mainly focusing on students. But yeah, go and learn about those there. And I really encourage everybody to come. They're really excellent events.
Yeah, I urge going to conference. I was actually going to ask you about the conferences that you guys hold. Even in my professional job that I do now, I often go to conferences, and networking is the key, because oftentimes you find that you are having the same problems that everybody else is having, and to be a successful student group, you need to learn from each other. Part of what I want to do with the show also, and I've been talking to Liz about this, and we started already engaging some of the local students that are members of the SSA at George Washington University, American University. I think we're going to get some people to come in on the show from George Mason. These are all local Virginia and DC schools. Even Georgetown University has a free thinkers group. And I think it's important that people learn from each other, and that's part of what I want to do here, to kind of talk about successes and failures and why that works. Now, I mentioned Georgetown University, which is a religious school. I was going to ask you, how many secular organization or secular student groups are in the SSA that are in religious schools?
I don't have an exact number off the top of my head. It's around 20 or so. So like DePaul comes to mind in Chicago, which is a Catholic university. And there's Presbyterian College, Luther College. California Lutheran University is actually where Evan Clark, who's the chair of the board of the Secular Student Alliance now, he went to California Lutheran and started the SSA group there. And he actually managed to, as an open atheist at California Lutheran University, get elected to be student body president of all of California Lutheran University. There's definitely lots of universities where even though they may have a Christian mission, they still realize that they are a university, and that this sort of openness to ideas and different identities is really part of what they need to embrace in order to be a place of higher education in the 21st century. And it's been really interesting to watch that reaction. Sometimes it is quite controversial. We had a group at Texas Christian University get started this year, and watching that happen, there was definitely some reaction from local media that was a little skeptical, but also lots of people that seem to think like, the university may be Christian, but not everybody here necessarily has to be or is. And if we're going to be open to them, that would be great. There are, unfortunately, definitely some religious universities where we've tried to get groups started, or I should say students at those universities have tried to get groups started. The University of Dayton comes to mind, but so too do Notre Dame and Duquesne in Pittsburgh, where the group went and filed the paperwork and they got denied. Mind you, at the same time, there is a Hillel probably at these universities. There is a Muslim student union. There's often even a gay straight alliance. So those things can sometimes be okay when the atheists are told to to go away.
Right.
And in the University of Dayton in particular, there was a big kerfuffle in the newspaper, There were faculty and students and alumni writing in and standing up for the right of the atheist students to organize, but the University of Dayton has not yet seen the light on that issue. We're continuing to work with them, but not yet.
You bring up what's very important to realize is that atheists are still one of the most despised communities, no matter how eminently likable we are.
Right.
And so I understand there's something that you guys do that's really important. Can you tell us about your rapid response organizer and what you have to offer kids all around the country if they try to stand up for their rights, as an atheist or a secularist and run into problems?
Sure. So the rapid response organizer is a position we're actually launching later in 2014. So it's not quite available yet. Although if you are trying to stand up for your rights as an atheist in a school, please call us or email us, and we will do everything we can. But as soon as we get the rapid response organizer online, they will have the background and the training and the budget to very quickly, usually within a day or two, fly to or drive if it's near to Columbus, Ohio, whatever trouble spot is going on, and meet with the students who are trying to stand up for their rights, make sure that we really understand how they're not getting what they need, and also meet with the administrators and sit down with them and say, hey, you may not realize it, but look at the demographics. Mm-hmm. This is a huge part of the population. We guarantee you that it's going to get bigger, and it's been getting bigger for years. You need to embrace the diversity of your student body and be open to this, because these students are real. They're here. They need to have their rights respected. You need to understand them. And why not get ahead of the curve and be remembered as an institution that was an early adopter of expanding respect and human rights, and figured this out early, rather than kicking and screaming as history drags you forward. And by the way, if you're at a public school, it's the law. Right. Because the Equal Access Act says that if you are offering extracurricular groups of any kind, you have to be viewpoint neutral. So just like the holiday displays that you were talking about earlier, it's a very similar principle that if there's going to be a fellowship of Christian athletes, there also needs to be, their students need to have the right to form a secular student alliance at their school.
So that's an interesting topic, because right now, high schools are starting to pop up with a lot of free thinkers, and you guys are also supporting some high schools, and we do have some in near where I. But so you've heard of the Good News Club, right?
I have. Yeah.
Right. So I think these guys are going above and beyond what the Equal Access Act actually is doing.
And they're going young, right?
They're going very young. They're going in elementary schools.
Yep, they sure are. The Good News Club is very disturbing. And I think the point you make that they're going beyond the Equal Access Act is dead on. These groups, at least as far as I'm aware, what I've read about them in the documentary I watched, which one of our student leaders helped make out of North Carolina, these groups are often adult-led, and they have really sophisticated materials that their national organization is sending out. They have an annual conference for these leaders, where these sort of off-campus folks that don't necessarily have any direct, obvious connection to the school are getting in, they're going in, and I think they're very deliberately misleading parents and the students about who they are and what's going on. It seems like it's just a Bible study and kids are going to get together and sing some songs and learn about Jesus. But looking at their materials in detail, it's really disturbing how very clearly they are trying to get students to convince their friends and be convinced themselves that if they don't believe in Jesus Christ, that they're going to go to hell and that they need to get right with God, or otherwise they're not a good student, not a good kid. And that's really, really scary stuff. I think it is really easy to take for granted just because, I don't know about you guys, but I assume that you were raised around lots of people that believed in hell and talked about hell. Maybe you even believed in hell when you were a kid. And it's easy to sort of just take that as, that's just a background part of what goes on. But we need to really step back and think about what a insanely terrifying idea that should be to anybody who hears about it, let alone a young child. It's really terrible. I mean, we wouldn't go around and tell kids that if they're not good, then somebody is going to, come and shoot them. And yet this is, hell is actually, it's a far worse threat to suffer forever in flames. I really think we need to think seriously about how the threat of hell gets used when young children are involved.
Andy Thompson was on from the Dawkins Foundation months ago, and he wrote a book, Why We Believe in God or Gods. And he talked about that a little bit. As teaching kids stuff like that, anything other than child abuse, what could you possibly say that's more hurtful to a child than do this, you're going to hell to suffer all these horrible things, or your friend who's Jewish is going to hell, all those things. And it really matters. It shapes our future leaders if you actually believe in it. Somebody who never really bought into that, it doesn't have the same impact on me, but the more religious people I interact with, we had somebody that talked about who runs I'm an Ex-Mormon. For a big part of our population, they really believe in hell, and it really does affect everything they do in life, and we need to counteract that.
Right, I think the Secular Student Alliance is a great place to start. I mean, the statistics show that most people lose their faith, the faith they've been brought up with when they go to college. And I've talked to many, many people who said the worst thing my parents could have done to help me lose my faith is send me to college, right?
Well, that was right. Rick Santorum decided Obama was a snob because he wanted people to go to college again. All the education, racism, it all plays together.
But even in college campuses, I mean, my experience when I was in college, this is Virginia Commonwealth University in Richmond, there were about 20, 30 Christian organizations, student-led organizations. There were a couple of Muslim organizations, and not one atheist organization on campus. So I said, look, and we applied for funding, and luckily, we ran into some bumps, but mostly it's a matter of getting funding from the university, and that can be very difficult because of the limited budgets and things like that. So part of the problems we came across is how do we, learning how to budget for things like speakers and things like that. Can you maybe talk about a little bit how to help students kind of balance and help maybe write a good budget for the school so that it can get the kind of money they want? I mean, are there any tricks that they can do, or or maybe they can come to you guys for help? They can
absolutely come to us for help. We would be delighted to help them with that. There's also training materials on our website, in our group running guide. I've actually given a couple of talks at our conferences that we post on YouTube. So if you go to youtube.com/secular students and then search for my name, I think I have there's at least one talk on there that's about being a fundraising ninja. So you can go and check that out. And it doesn't just focus on getting money from your university, which is super important and an advantage that on-campus groups have over off-campus groups, to have that university funding and access to university space. But there's all sorts of other different funding streams you can think of. You can have, your members give a little bit of money, not a ton, but even most students can afford $5 to be a member, and that can add up if you have a lot of members. You can work with off-campus groups to see if any of them are willing to support you, and often they are, especially if you're willing to, write down your ideas. There are also departments, like not just your student activities fund, but departments like the biology department or the philosophy department might help you do specific things.
Yeah, and that was the case when we got Christopher Hitchens to come on board. We did have a little bit of budget for him, but we also went to the dean of the School of Humanities and Sciences, and they threw some money our way to kind of get the debate going and things like that. So yeah, that's a great point. You can go to other departments if you have a specific event that you want to put together. Sometimes they will help and get money that way. But it can be difficult. But I want to ask you another quick question. What, in your opinion, what makes a student group successful in your opinion?
Activity. Get out there and do stuff. It doesn't matter what. If you are really into leading service events, then go out and get some service events going. If you are really into having discussion meetings, then go out and get those discussion meetings going. Whatever it is, tell people about it.
Right.
I think the most successful groups are groups that are out there hanging up flyers every week to let people know that their groups are alive and well and things are going on. And you know what? Like, and well, I will say, do what you're passionate about, but also try to get enough leaders that your group's doing a lot of different things. So, doing service events is great. Doing discussion meetings is great. Doing both is even better. So if you can be doing both of those, if you can be doing educational events, if you can be doing all those kinds of different things, that's fantastic. And get different people to lead different events. Don't try to do it all yourself.
Right.
And don't feel like you have to do it all right away. But get out there, be active, and the events that you are doing will attract the people that are interested in them. They're not, no event is going to attract everybody. You're never going to have an event that absolutely speaks to everybody on your campus, and that's fine. Just get out there and go do what you are excited about doing. And hopefully there will be some other leaders in your group that are excited about doing different things, and you can get out there and have at. And don't be discouraged if you have a meeting or two that have low attendance. Midterms can make things busy.
Yeah, sure.
Students can get overwhelmed. You may just have a couple of down weeks. It's okay. Just get back out there and hang up some more flyers, and keep having your meetings, and you will be successful.
Right. We only have a couple of minutes left. Can you talk briefly about the importance of activism? It's one thing to say, okay, I've looked into all this stuff. I don't believe in God anymore, or I think separation of church and state is important.
And very briefly, because we're almost running out of time.
Right. It's another thing to get out there and be very active about and vocal and talk to other people and run shows. So for both the student level and for your level, how important is activism for the secular and atheist movement?
It's really important. Since I don't have a lot of time, I want to say two things about it. Number one, it probably will make you feel better than anything else. Going out and being an activist is incredibly, incredibly rewarding. So I really encourage it for that reason. But I think another super important thing, whether you think of it as activism or not, being out is the most important thing you can do. Let your family know, let your coworkers know, let your fellow students know that you're whatever label you like, agnostic, humanist, whatever, let them know, be out.
Well, good. Well, August, unfortunately, we're running out of time here. We want to thank you for being on the show. We want to thank our audience for watching. And I urge everybody to go to secularstudents.org if you're watching as a student and get some helpful hints. And join us next week.
Danny DeWolf with Scientology.
Yeah, we got the L. Ron Hubbard's great-great-grandson joining us. So it'll be an interesting topic. Check us out on YouTube and Facebook.